Those are pumpkin seeds if you want.
Oh, thanks.
Well, welcome to,
And this is delicious.
I guess this is lecture number 10 or so, or something like that. We're about to study chapter 10 of Mesilat Yesharim, V'vei Midat Nekiut, describing the trait of Nekiut, which is, I'm going to go around the room and online. Please tell me what you, how Nekiut is translated. What's the trait called?
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness? Okay, and what about
Cleanliness.
and yours?
Yep.
And mine, blamelessness. What about you guys online? Wait, yeah, actually, let me turn the sound on. I apologize. Now, say it online.
That is really good.
Lost your
Cleanliness.
Cleanliness? Jeffrey, what does yours say?
I can't see you. Let me see what happened to my thing.
Okay. All right, well, I have blamelessness, but I don't like cleanliness. And technically speaking, Nekiut is the best translation is cleanliness. Like you can use the word naki or clean, literally to refer to clean. Like if you clean up your room, kind of clean, right? But I don't think it's a good translation at all. And as we learn it, one translation I wanted to use was consistency. That's my own. And you'll see as we learn it whether you like it. But consistency really, after I thought about it for a while and I was preparing, it only really describes one aspect. The other aspect of Nekiut is perfection. So if you can think of an English word that that includes both consistency and perfection, which I couldn't come up with.
OCD.
OCD, maybe, yeah. So then you might have a better translation. Can you guys hear me? I'm gonna put my microphone closer. I don't know if is that better now?
Much better. Much better.
Okay, good, excellent. Sorry about that.
Okay.
Anyway, so
Purity.
so we're about to start, and I'm going to read in the Hebrew the first chapter of Nekiut of cleanliness, or I have blamelessness in my English translation. Is short and just describes what it is. The next chapter, chapter 11, is I think the longest chapter in Mesilat Yesharim, and probably the most powerful and one that'll really kind of shake us into behaving ourselves. But so let's just learn what Nekiut is. So remember what we described so far was two traits: the trait of zihirut, of being careful, which basically to make it's summarized as watching out, being careful not to do bad things, essentially, to stay away from things like that. And the second trait was zirizut, was to do the good things with more zeal, with more excitement, with more concern. So basically, you're now a person. We've achieved levels 1 and 2, right? We're avoiding all the bad stuff. We're not doing bad things, and we're occupying our time with good things. And I apologize, I'm going to silence my phone. And now we're about to learn about Nekiut. So what is Nekiut? If we avoided bad and we're doing good, so what else is there left to do? Well, that's what we're about to find out. Okay. Midat Nekiut, the trait of Nekiut, of cleanliness, Adam naki legamri, a person should be completely clean, free and clear, mikol midaro mikol chet, from anything that's bad, from even a little bit of bad. Lo dai, and it sounds a little scary, but as we learn what it means, we'll understand what he's talking about. It's not like he's expecting every human being to be perfect and never, ever, ever step in the wrong direction. Although we are learning how to strive to get there. But lo daimi masha chet bom before some v'gali. It's not that it's enough that the sins or that he or she is avoiding are the things that are well known. There are certain things that are well known to be. Everybody knows walking over to somebody and punching them in the face, that's not good, right? That's just not good. Walking over to somebody, grabbing their purse and running, that's not good. Those are the obvious things that the vast majority of us don't engage in. So, telling most of us that are watching or they're participating in this lecture that you shouldn't go grab somebody's purse and run, it's probably not going to change our behavior that much, because none of us are really doing these things. Now we're taking it the next stage to the things which our hearts tell us how to justify to ourselves, right? Our hearts tell us, oh, it's not maybe they don't really mind. It's not really bad. Everyone does it. It's okay. That kind of thing. The kinds of things that are deep down we know there's something wrong, but we make up all kinds of reasons why they're not so bad. If we really look down, it's obvious that the reason why the person thought that these things are okay is not because of he really thought they're okay, but because that person had because the person is going after their own needs, their own desires, and ultimately some selfish interest led you to make that decision. It's the classic, it's the decisions that we make because of our own biases, right? But not because we really truthfully believe that it's okay. A person did not get rid of his own biases completely. Therefore, that's why his heart is drawing him to go on the wrong path. But a person that can get rid of this selfishness completely, and he's completely free and clear from any bad or evil inclination that his desires draw him after them. So then when he sees things, then he sees things clearly, completely. And when he makes decisions, his discernment is pure. And his desire for something isn't going to tilt his judgment in a specific direction. Anything that is sinful, even if it's something very mild, something very minor, he'll recognize immediately. He'll be able to see clearly and realize that it's wrong, and he'll stay away from it. In the next chapter, when we start doing chapter 11, when he gives examples, you will really get a feel for what he's talking about and how very, very deeply relevant this idea is to us. This is not just for perfect people. It kind of feels like, hey, yeah, most of us, but we'll see soon that this is really something that we all need to think about. And I do want to point out another thing here is how he's honing in on the fact that our selfishness and our desires affect our judgment. They make the way we make our decisions different. So our judgment changes, and why it's so important to have to be able to judge things objectively.
Yeah, I'm seeing this like from either a Maimonides or a Stoic perspective, where passion it clouds the brain. You want to be rational.
Exactly. Right. Exactly. He wants to keep you on, and that's why in the next sentence, and this is why the wise men that are perfect, that are whole, that are complete, that really in a serious way purify their actions. Even a small thing, they are called. What's the title they have? Nikiyei Hadat. They are the people that are literally translates to the clean of knowledge. Yesharim in Jerusalem, and then that's what Billy was just saying. I think it's the cleanliness of knowledge, that your knowledge isn't clean. We all know what happens. When you read a typical lawyer's brief, who's either arguing on the side of guilty or the side of innocent in some case, right? It's well known. I mean, this isn't a criticism of lawyers. They have to prove the guy's innocent. So they're going to give a very logical, reasoned explanation as to why you should think the guy's innocent, even though we all know that every single thing that they're writing is colored by a preconceived idea that the guy is innocent, right? It's never going to be an objective case, right? And the same thing with the lawyer on their side, because they have a purpose in what they're writing. But someone who is truly objective will be able to really look at the facts objectively. In our court system, at least in theory, that's supposed to be the jury, but at least in theory, that's how you're supposed to look at things. But if you have, we all know that if you have a personal interest in the matter, it's really, really difficult, if not impossible, to truly look at things objectively. But we all have that job, because we make decisions every single day, and we should try our best to be as objective as possible. And that would be a naki. A person that can achieve that is a person that has achieved the trait that we're learning about now. So you see now, this is the difference between the guy who is just as zahir, the one who is careful, the one who achieved the first level, and the person who is naki, the one who is clean or consistent or perfect, right? The idea is similar. The idea is you're trying to avoid bad things, right? So on that level, they're really the same, but there's a huge difference there. In other words, qualitatively, they're the same, but quantitatively, they're different. Because qualitatively, they're both people who are trying to avoid doing bad. But quantitatively, the naki will be able to avoid bad in much more situations than just the zahir, than the person who's just careful. Hazar is a person who is careful in his actions. And he is going to be careful not to sin in things that everyone knows are sinful. He's not going to, openly cheat. He's not going to openly steal. He's not going to openly be violent. He's not going to openly do things in public that everyone knows are sinful, right? So that's good. I mean, it's okay. It's a decent start. It's better than some people, right? But he truly is not a master over himself. Right? Right? A master himself said that he knows how to prevent his heart from being drawn after his inner desires. That he doesn't know how to stop his inner desires from twisting and turning him to show him all kinds of rationalizations, right? All kinds of rationales, and all kinds of things that people aren't so clear as to whether or not they're so bad. And there's so many things that we do. So especially in interactions with other people, little innuendos, little, phrases that might not be directly or openly hostile to some people, or might not be openly abusive, but they're little. But when you really look at it, it's not respectful. It's not right. Even though he's trying, he is trying to hold himself back and to hold off his desires. He's not really changing his inner nature to change who you are deeply. And he's not able to truly remove from his heart the desires, his physical desires that are leading him in the wrong direction. Right? He can hold it off. He can control it, right? He can keep himself, right? And go after what chachma, what wisdom. Remember this dichotomy here. This dichotomy is between someone who follows his selfish desires and someone who follows wisdom and truth. And in that sense, it's very Maimonidean. And it's like what Billy was saying before, that by using our heads, by using, making rational, reasonable decisions that are devoid of personal selfish needs and wants, so on, allows us to make dispassionate decisions about how to proceed in our lives. But still, the darkness of materiality is still doing its thing. It's still trying to convince him. It's still trying to pull at him. So a naki is the guy or girl who gets rid of this stuff, who's able to make truly dispassionate and truly objective decisions. After you start off being a zahir, you start off being careful. That was the first level, right? And and now you've gotten past this initial cleansing, right? From the open and obvious sins. And then you went ahead and you learned how to become a regular in doing things correctly with zeal and with excitement, right? And now you're full of love for God and desire for a relationship with God. Now this habitual life that you're living in, which is now on the right track, It will take you away from those material issues. Now you can start devoting yourself to truly reach completion, to truly reach perfection. So you can really reach a pure cleanliness. That's why this is the perfection aspect. The consistent aspect is that consistently in every situation, even when it's only a minor turn off, you're able to consistently make the right decision. You have already doused the flame of passion, hagufis, of material desire, melibo, from your heart, because now you're lit up with the flame of desire for God. So now your sight has now become clear and concise, and you can actually see what you should be saying. That you won't be seduced, right? The darkness of his physical being won't make him lead him astray. And all of his actions will be completely free and clear. So, you want to say something?
Yeah, this kind of reminds me a little of the idea. I think it comes more in Christianity. I've never seen it here, but just the body, the sin of the body, like the physical being is sinful, and the mind is holy. And so I'm kind of wondering, like, what's happening here.
Yeah, well, he's definitely giving that kind of a vibe, and we that this differentiation between acting rationally with your mind as opposed to following your body's desires. But he is also replacing that the bodily desires with, instead of it is the desire and love for God, like he's replacing it with another type of passion, another type of love. But yeah, he definitely is doing that, and there are different aspects of Judaism that try to focus on not so much suppressing those desires, but rather using them focusing them in the right direction. To a large extent, that approach towards changing our lives for the better and living the way we should became very strongly emphasized by the Hasidic movement, right? And this predates the Hasidic movement by a little bit, but this became more of a way of the Musar movement, which was more this kind of approach, right? So sometimes some people, if you wanted to melt down the difference, the ethical difference between Hasidim and Mitnagdim and those that were against them, which eventually the Muslim movement was part of that, was emphasizing this difference, that the Hasidim looked more at taking those emotions and using them for the right purpose, whereas the Mitnagdim or the Muslim movement looked more into suppressing or negating those desires and instead doing everything rationally. But yes, go ahead.
So you had said that in the translation I have, it says the fire of physical desire will be extinguished excuse me, from his heart. And you said the fire of material desire. Those are very different. Because if we're talking about physical desires and sexual, or are we talking about excuse me, pursuing material desires? Because
mine uses the word corporal.
Corporal is a physical, is a more it's more bodily, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I was like, am I reading this right?
Right. No, chomriyuto is the Hebrew word, and chomriyut means physicality.
Yeah.
Right. So I think how did I translate it? I don't remember what I said, but
you said material.
I said material. Okay, because I think physical or corporal is a better translation. So if I said it, I'll take it back, and thanks for correcting me. But chomriyuto is much better translated as physicality, right?
I have physical being.
Yeah.
The sinister power of his physical
Yes, but it isn't necessary. Obviously, sexual
what would-
desire is in that, and that's one of the main ones. But it's not just sexual desire; it's any physical desire that we have. The desire for more wealth, the desire for more power, the
I,
desire,
yeah, okay. So you are saying material, because if it's, if you're supposed to go and multiply, how are you going to extinguish all physical desire? Doesn't make sense. But if you're saying the physical desire includes that material, then I can go with.
Yeah. Well, we'll see in chapter 11 when he goes through. It's very long. It's going to take us at least tonight. Well, tonight we'll do some of it, I hope, because chapter 10 is short, and then probably two more after tonight, all in just chapter 11. Yeah, it's long, and it goes through example after example in detail, and then you'll know exactly what he means, and what he doesn't mean. But it's certainly right now, the way he's presenting it, it sounds like we should negate these physical desires, overcome them, and instead act completely rationally, completely according to our intellects, and make sure that our intellects aren't being influenced by those physical / material desires. Right. And so that aspect is definitely here. Whether that would encompass the Mesilat Yesharim, the Ramchal's full attitude towards ethics, you'll decide when we're finished the book. Does he believe that that's the whole deal, or maybe he also has a component of then taking those physical desires and using them for the right purposes? We'll see. But for now, it certainly looks like that, and that's what he's saying. Yeah, no, it's an important point, because those are two. It's always a debate, and when I had learned it over the years, it was always presented this way. The Muslim movement believes that you're supposed to get rid of all of that passion, all of that desire, and replace it with just rational, intellectual decision making. You should be completely ruled by doing what's right and staying away from what's wrong, and that's it. Get rid of all. And where the Hasidim would say, no, you're supposed to take all of those desires and live with them, and then just make sure you channel them all in the right direction. And that was it's set up as a debate. The truth is that the way we're supposed to live is probably a combination of the two. So we'll see what Mesilat Yesharim, which side of that debate he falls on. But right now, he's clearly on side A. Regarding this particular trait, King David, was very happy about himself and his own achievements, right? V'omer, and he used to say, "Erchatz b'nikayon kapoi," I will wash with cleanliness my hands, v'asovava, and then I will surround, or I will encircle, it's mizbachacha Hashem, your altar, God. So he's basically, what does this mean? He's saying, I cleanse myself, I cleanse my hands, right? And then I'm able to surround and encircle, and it gives you the image of dancing around, the presence of God, because I'm clean, because I've gotten rid of all of the dirt from my hands. Ki be'emes, in truth, rak mi she'yunakel gamri mikol nidnut b'yavon. Really, only a person who is truly clear of even the tiniest amount of sin, who haroi le'ro'ot et b'nei malach Hashem, only he's able to truly see the face of God and enjoy the face of God. If you still have this selfishness and you're not completely clean, right, then you would be, when you appear before God, you'd be ashamed. You'd have a lot to be ashamed of, right? Because you're still a selfish, somewhat materialistic person. Ezra Sofer, and we see when Ezra said, Elohai boshti v'nechlamti, God, I am embarrassed and I am ashamed to lift up my face towards you, God, because he felt that he was inadequate. V'hinei vadai, certainly ki malacha rabahi, it's a great, tremendous amount of work. This isn't easy. La'adam, for a person la'agia shlemas hamirazos, for a person to reach this perfect and this such a level of perfection. Ki ha'averos hanikaros v'duos, because the sins that are recognized and well known, it's easy to not do them, right? It's easy not to do the big guns, right? The big averos, the big sins. Everybody knows that they're wrong. We feel that they're wrong. We know that they're wrong. We see that they're wrong. Everybody knows that they're wrong. So I mean, it takes only a few brazen people are going to openly violate the basic norms that everyone knows and agrees upon that are obvious. But this tremendous amount of diktuk, of scrutiny, I guess, which is necessary in order to achieve this level of cleanliness, of perfection, is very difficult. Because our tendency to make justifications for ourselves covers up the chet, covers up the sinfulness. We justify it to ourselves until it makes it okay. We explain all kinds of reasons why it's okay, and then it becomes okay, even though it's not okay. Right? It's similar to what the rabbis teach us of blessed memory. Are those sins that a person, stomps under his footsteps. So those are the sins that are going to be surrounding him when it comes time for that big day of judgment. What we're going to have to answer for it. God's not going to ask me why I didn't run down the street and grab a woman's purse. He's not going to ask me that, because that really didn't take that much effort on my part not to do that. But he might ask me, there's a lot of things you did that weren't really so great, sometimes. And when he gives examples, I'm going to wait for the next chapter, and you really understand what he means, and you'll understand how meaningful this is for all of us. We all think we're totally honest. How many of us in this room think that we have to worry about something like stealing? Most of us don't even think.
Me doing it or someone doing it to me.
Yeah, both. But I guess, yeah. I mean, but we don't think of ourselves as being guilty of this thing. But we'll see soon about why this is really relevant to us. They also said, "Ruba megazel." Most people, the Chazal taught us, most people are guilty of stealing. And if you think you're not, like I said, just wait. A few are guilty of sexual sins, but everyone everyone is somehow guilty at some point of illicit, wrong, incorrect, and of speech. Saying things that they shouldn't say. Things about others and talking in ways we shouldn't talk. And that Chazal, the rabbis teach us, everyone falls into that trap. Because it's so subtle. Everyone slips on this one. But because they don't recognize, sometimes you don't even realize that what you're saying is hurtful to somebody. Or you think, oh, it's not hurtful to me, I wouldn't care, so I'll say it about someone else. You don't know or understand what kinds of things are hurtful to other people, and we all are guilty of that. And the rabbis again said, David was careful and cleansed himself completely from all of this. And that's why when he went to war, he went with full confidence, chazak, and he would ask God for as follows in his prayers: Erdof oivai, may I chase my enemies, v'asigim, and I should capture them or reach them, overtake them. And I will not come back ad kalosim, until my enemies are destroyed. David had such confidence going into battle because he knew that his intentions were pure. He was completely with God. He had his mind and his heart in the right place. He chooses 3 other righteous Judean kings. Along the many lists of kings of Yehuda, of Judah, there's a few that were known as righteous. So he just picked almost all of them. Most were not exactly exemplars of personal behavior, but these were. So lefisha lo hayu menukim kol kach, because they weren't quite as good as David, right? Like David says in that same verse, he says, excuse me, Yigmeleni Hashem kitzidki. May God repay me according to my own righteousness. Kivor yodai, like the cleanliness of my hands. Vor is like soaped hands, like soapy washed hands, clean hands. Yoshavli, God should return me. And it says, V'yoshav Hashem li kitzidki kivor yodai, and I get in the same idea. Vu habor v'hanikayon. This is the cleanliness hazesh zacharnu. V'yoz chazar v'omar kivacha eretz gedud Again, some other quotes. Adolphus asked the game, and I'm going to go to the last quote in this little paragraph. He said, and this is a famous verse. We said it several times during the high holidays. Who is the one that can go up on God's mountain? Who's the one that can stand in the place of his holiness? It is the person who is clean of hands, uvar levov, and pure of heart. He's the one who can stand there, because they've gotten rid of the selfishness that guides most of us. The omnam vaday shamida azos kasha. It certainly is a very tough, very hard, and difficult. Ki teva ha'adam chalash, because a person's nature is weak. V'libo nifte al nikala, and it's very easy for us to be seduced into to the wrong direction. Umatir la'atzman, we make permissible for ourselves, right? Hadvarim sheyuchal and soba and kedeata, and all kind, anything, anytime we can find some sort of excuse to explain why it's okay to do this and this and this, right? We find ourselves an excuse. It's very easy. However, a person who is able to completely, intellectually, without and objectively make his decisions or her decisions and live their lives accordingly, without those selfish negiot, selfish tendencies, that person has reached a very high level, because he stood up to a tremendous battle and he won. Let's come now to explain this midah. So we're going to start chapter 11. Before I start, any comments so far on Nekiut? Explain what it is and why it's so important and why it's so difficult. And now he's going to give examples that are really going to, the examples of the pratim, of the details. And when we learn the details, we're going to really understand what he means.
Yeah, I feel like chapter 10 was kind of nebulous. It was kind of like, I don't really know what we're talking about. I'm not sure how effective it was for me, like setting it up. I feel like.
Right.
I'm trusting the process.
Right. Okay.
All right, let's see what else.
Yeah, no, and that's good, and that's why we have chapter 11. And chapter 11, we're gonna at least 3 weeks, probably more, possibly more of, and then when we finish, then we'll understand what he means by Nekiut, right?
I have a brief question.
Go ahead. Yes.
Does Luzzatto claim to have achieved this level anywhere in this book, that he's achieved these very high levels of purity and conduct?
I don't think he's ever said that about himself, not that I'm aware of, but I have not. He wrote like hundreds of books, many of which are lost and gone, unfortunately, because of the persecution that he underwent. But even of the 35 or 40 that have been published, I don't know if he's ever. I'm not familiar with them all, but I don't know. Go ahead.
Is he the guy that thought, kind of gave an alternate reality to heaven? Like it's the future. I don't remember.
Is it the Ramchal?
I don't know. I'm asking if it's him. I seem to remember that maybe in our first lecture.
Maybe that was El Ron.
No.
I'm not sure. I don't remember.
Just
I'm
like,
not sure.
As far as heaven being heaven, it's more of like you can think of it as just in the future. This will happen. Is this the right book? Maybe I'm thinking of
It
the
might
other
be.
book.
It's starting to sound a little bit like Rambam, but yeah. All right, so let's learn about Nekiut, right? Nekiut, or cleanliness, perfection, consistency. Let's see what it is. Prate midat hanekiut rabim heimod. The details or the particulars of the trait or the attribute of Nekiut are many. Vihinam kichol hapratim shebachol hashesa metzvot lo taseh, right? And they are similar to the details that are involved in all of the 365 negative commandments, all the things that we're told in the Torah not to do, right? There's the overall commandment, right? Thou shalt not steal, right? And you automatically conjure up in your mind somebody running into the Louvre, some group of people, and stole the French crown jewels or something.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so that's what you think of in your mind, right? So most of us aren't running into museums and stealing crown jewels, So but that's you're not no stealing. You're not allowed to steal. Okay, fine, right? So ki amnam inyan hamida right? But then there's details. So we're going to go into those details. Right? But I told you the basics of what this trait is about. Not just that you shouldn't steal, but anything that's like stealing, that's similar to stealing, that's basically wrong because it's close to stealing, is what you need to be clean of. It's, of course, our desires, our evil inclination would love to push us to do all kinds of things, including running into the Louvre and stealing the crown jewels, right? But kvar yesh mehem she'atava mechamdan yoser. We do know that of all of these sins that are out there, there are some that our hearts draw us to more than others. There are some sins that we have more, there's not that many of us that have a desire to wear clothing that's mixed with wool and linen, unless someone in here has this intense desire to violate that precept in the Torah. I just absolutely have to wear shatnez in my jacket. Most of us couldn't care less what our jacket is made out of, as long as it looks nice, keeps us warm, and does the job, right? But so we don't have that much of a desire to do that sin. But steal, to have something nice and get away with it, and maybe not do something that's so, I can see a lot of us have that desire, right? So asher al kain yitztarich ben yoser chizuk l'natzeach. Those are the subjects. So in other words, he's not going to bother telling you about how to watch out for the pratim, the details of wool and linen in your clothes, because that's not the kind of thing that we're really that worried about, right? But there are some things, right, that we do need to be careful, and you need extra strength to conquer your inclinations, ulinakos menachet, and to remain cleansed of sin. And the Chazal gave us two examples: gezel, which is theft, right, va'arayot, and sexual relations. Nafsho shaladim mechamdasan, and people desire these things misabelam, and they have I'm trying to think of a better word than desire, or lust towards them. So he's going to tackle the issue of gezel first, the issue of stealing first, right? We see most people are not open thieves, right? Most people are not running into the Louvre to steal the French crown jewels. They're not actually going and grabbing from their friends their items and grabbing things from other people and putting them into our own pockets or wallets, right? So Alfal Pekin, but nevertheless, Ruba, most people, To'amim Tam Geneva b'masom u'matanam, they do taste the taste of theft in their business dealings. B'masheyoru heter li'atzmam, because they tell themselves it's okay, right? Lihistaker ish, for one person to make profit, behefsedu shel chaver, on somebody else's loss. V'yomru, and they say l'harviach shani, for profits, it's okay, right? That it's okay to make, as long I'm working for profit, that's business. It's business. That other guy lost. I stole his contract. I did something a little bit underhanded. That's business. That's the way we do business. How many times do we hear ourselves saying that? And how right is that? How okay is that to do that in a way when you're taking away somebody else's livelihood, right? And the world has not changed, not since him, and probably will never change. The Torah says many times we shouldn't steal, and it says it in all kinds of languages. It says lo tignov, don't steal, and tignov generally means like an illicit stealing, like sneaking into someone's house. Lo tigzol, don't be a thief, don't rob, which gezela generally means grabbing something from someone out in the open. Lo ta'ashok, do not oppress, which oppress could mean not necessarily even stealing. It can mean like forcing someone to sell when, in an underhanded way. Lo tichachashu, don't lie, right? Lo tishakru, do not misrepresent and lie. Ishba, like you misrepresent something, you sell somebody a car and you don't tell them that the engine blows out every couple hundred miles, just Just below tonu ishes achiv, you shouldn't rip somebody off, right? Like that means sell somebody. Oh yeah, this is worth $300 on the market. I'm selling it to a great deal, 250. Meanwhile, down the road he could have bought it for 125, right? Lo tasig gvul re'echa, don't cross someone else's boundary. In other words, if somebody has a route, they have a territory that then and you go and take over their territory, you're taking something away from them. These are things that the Torah tells us. So the Torah lists many different types of things that are all in the category of stealing, right? These are all parts of the laws of stealing. Kol masim rabim, these are, which include many things. These are things that happen all the time in normal business day-to-day relationships. If you go out into the market, you'll see people doing these things day in, day out, all the time. And none of those people, if you ask them, would tell you that they're robbing or they're thieving or they're stealing, even though what they're doing is not according to the Torah. It's just not right. Right? And there are many, many prohibitions that these people are violating. So it's not just the obvious and well-known types of oppression and stealing that are prohibited. Right? Anything that might approach stealing or be like stealing, and end up possibly causing stealing, taking something from someone, is also included in the violation. And it's really, sometimes it's, if we think to ourselves, is this the right thing to do test? And how often do we think of ourselves that way? And then we say, oh, it's business. If we have a friend, I don't know, if you're a real estate broker or something, and and somebody put down a bid, and then you find out that there's somebody else out of town looking for a house or something, and that if you slip a note to them or a phone call or an email and say, hey, if you just offer another $5,000, I know these people can't afford it, they won't be able to outbid you, and they could take the house or something. These are things that happen every day. And meanwhile, technically, did you steal? No, but did you take something away from somebody? Is it right? So that these are the kinds of things we have to think about. And about things like this, the rabbis taught as the verse here is referring to sexual transgression. It says he did not defile his neighbor's wife, but what it's a pasuk in Yechezkel. But the rabbis understand this to mean that he didn't take his friend's trade. So if you have a friend, he's been the only blacksmith in town for 10 years. Everyone needs a blacksmith. They need their hammer fixed, or their whatever blacksmiths do, the knives made, right? And then you decide to open up a shop down the block, right? So then what you've done was you've taken something away from him. Technically, did you do something wrong? Did you steal? But it wasn't right. Rabbi Yehuda already, we know that he said that a shopkeeper he shouldn't give out candies to children, the tinokos. The trick was, if you opened a store and you gave out candies to the kids, then the parents would come, and then they'd come and they'd buy stuff from you instead of the other guy. So Rabbi Yehuda said, no, you're not allowed to give out candies. If you have a store, you give out a store, because it's not right. The rabbis, they argued and they said that you're allowed to, but the only reason why, because there's no rule that says the guy down the street can't also give out candies, right? So he can give out candies too. So it's not like you're doing something that the other guy can't do. But in principle, though, if you're doing something that the other guy couldn't, then it would be taking away business from him, even though it might technically not be stealing. They said it's worse when you steal something from a human being than when you steal something from God. Stealing something from God is referring to taking an item that was consecrated for use in the temple and using it for your own purposes. right? And you and I can see right away, why is one worse than the other? God doesn't own things. He doesn't really care. He doesn't need our stuff, right? So when you use something, you're violating it's something. We're supposed to treat it as if it's holy. We're not supposed to use this for our own purposes. Okay, it's a sin to use it, right? But when you take away something from a human being, you can never really repay it. You took it and it's gone, right? And the Torah hints that by saying the way the Torah refers to it. In one place it says, do not sin by using it for yourself. And the other one says, do not use it for yourself because it's a sin. So we see that the Torah takes it more seriously when you steal from another person. And then in order to emphasize just more examples of stealing, things that we don't necessarily think about in our every day-to-day lives. The rabbi said that if you are a worker and you're hired by the hour or an hourly wage to work, right? And the work, and you're allowed to take a lunch break, you don't have to say Birchat Hamazon, you don't have to bench, right? You're not supposed to, because by benching, you're taking away more time by saying Birchat Hamazon, grace after meals, you're taking away time from your workers. So the Chacham said you're allowed to eat without benching. How many workers do you know do that? And they give me a lunch, that means I have time to eat my sandwich, right? If he's paying me for this time, then I shouldn't spend that time, thanking God for the food, or Birchas Achonos to Birchas Hamazon especially. And even for Shema, if you're working and it's the morning and it's time to say the Shema, right? You don't have the right to say the entire Shema, just the first parsha, right? That's the halacha. How many people do we know today that even are aware of this halacha, of this law? Very few, if any, right? But this is how seriously they took it, So how much of us think about that? If we are hourly workers, how much do we think about, wasting our time, cruising on Facebook or whatever it is we're doing with our, making personal phone calls or whatever it is that we're doing, do we think about these things? Most of us don't. We obviously the norms change. What's openly acceptable today is acceptable. I'm not trying to say, if your work's policy is you're allowed to have your cell phone and make a call, if it's accepted, that's a different story. But if not, then you're stealing from your boss, right? This is true when it comes to holy things, when it comes to a law of saying blessings that we're obligated to do. Certainly things that are optional. Someone who's hired for a day, in other words, he's hired for a time period. He's not allowed to do them, right? And so that he shouldn't be wasting the time of his employer. And if he does, he's a gazlan. He's stealing time. Abba Chilkia was a rabbi in the time of the Talmud. He wouldn't even ask. Someone comes and says, "Hey, how are you doing?" He wouldn't even answer. He'd continue doing his work, right? Even to when a distinguished rabbi would walk by and say, "Hi, how are you doing?" Right? He wouldn't answer. Because he refused to waste the time of the person who had hired him. And Yaakov Avinu, our forefather Jacob, said, in the daytime, I ate even though it was hot. The karach ba'laylan was freezing cold at night, but and I barely had any sleep, right? So because he was saying how faithful he was, the way he worked for his father-in-law Lavan. Mayanu Efo. How in the world could people today answer those people that do their own things and they're involved in their own pleasures, their own stuff, b'shas malacha, at the time when they're supposed to be working, and they're actually not doing the work that they're supposed to, that they were hired to do. People that were hired to do an hourly wage and they're sitting around doing nothing. Or even worse, they're involved in doing their own wheeling and dealing for their own profits while they're on someone else's dime. And how much of us think about these things? Klolo shel davar. The bottom line of this rule is right? If a person is hired to do a job, right? Then those hours that he's hired for belong to the person who's paying him. When a person's hired by time, right, he is like sold to him for a day. Anything that a person uses just for his own benefit, that's pure stealing. And the person, the boss, is not obligated to forgive him for it. It's not forgiven. Sins that occur when one person wrongs another. You can fast on Yom Kippur 1,000 times. It's not going to get away with it. You have to go to the person who you wronged and ask for forgiveness. So these are some examples of what he means by Nekiut. Are we starting to get an idea of what Nekiut means? Right? So it's starting to answer. I mean, he's going to go through examples of a lot more sins. We're still not finished with Gezel, with stealing. But the basic idea is just that we're all involved in all kinds of interactions all day. And many times we make selfish decisions that harm other people and that take away things from other people, and we justify it to ourselves. To be a naki, to be a person with this trait of cleanliness, means that you don't do that, that you're careful on these things, and it's not just running into the Louvre and grabbing, the emeralds and rubies that makes you a thief. But you could be a thief when you take something else, or time from someone else, or you, there's all kinds of things we do. Obviously, we have to update to the kinds of workplaces and environments we live in today, which aren't exactly the same as they were in his day. But we get the idea, right? And how many times people, what do you mean? I did a mitzvah. I wasn't just hanging around at work, playing a video game. I was doing some special mitzvah. I was giving tzedakah. I was writing a check to my synagogue. I was some great, wonderful thing. It's not going to be considered a great act of charity that you did, right? It can be considered a sin. If you took someone else's time and you decided to use that time in order to, do something that you're not, even if you have this in your mind that it's some sort of a mitzvah, it's not considered a mitzvah. She'ein avera mitzvah. A sin cannot be a good deed. Ukroksiv, sone gezel ba'ola, right? God is not interested in having a sacrifice, which is a stolen sacrifice. He's not interested in that. A guy goes and he steals a saw, which is a large measurement of wheat. And he grinds the wheat into flour of afa, and he bakes it into a nice big piece of bread. And he brings that piece of bread to shul, and everyone stands around and makes hamotzi lechem in aretz. That's not a blessing. That is that's like a blasphemy. That's he's increasing anger, and that blessing is worthless, right? The chsiv, as it says in the Torah, Hashem, right? One who steals and does something for his own profit, and then he goes and makes a blessing, he's being blasphemous towards God. And similar things it says, woe is to the person who those things that are his advocates are now his criticizers. In other words, all of those mitzvot that you do, all of those good deeds. It's the classic of a guy who's a swindler and a thief and a total whatever, who tries to buy his way, so to speak, into heaven by donating money to a good cause. Right? Woe is such a person that those good deeds are useless and worthless when you consider the source of his money and where it came from. Like it says, when a person steals a lulav from someone else, and then he goes and uses it for a supposed mitzvah. I didn't know saying gezel chayfetz gazel, right? The gezel zman gezel. Stealing an item is stealing. Stealing someone else's time is stealing. Ma gozel es hachayfetz also ba mitzvah nasa sanigora kategora. Just like if a person steals an item and uses it for a mitzvah, then that thing which, when he goes up to the proverbial heaven, And is God says, all right, well, what good stuff? Well, I shook a lulav on that Sukkot, and God looks and he says, that's not going to get you very far. You stole that lulav, right? So Asman, it's the same thing if you steal someone else's time, also about mitzvah, and you take that time to do some sort of a good deed, or what you think is a good deed. Nasa sanegoro kategoro. I'm gonna finish with this last statement and open for questions, even though he's gonna continue on this subject. What does God really want from us? The bottom line, what does he want from us? Is he wants from us honesty, trustfulness, trustworthiness. Are the people that are honest are the ones that God protects. It says, open the gates, and may the righteous nation enter. And who's the righteous nation? Shomer Emunim. It's the one who guards honesty. If my synagogue I used to daven at in Baltimore was called Shomer Emuna, that literally would translate as the guardians of the way the Ramchal would translate of honesty. Some people would say it of Emuna meaning faith, but honesty in this context is a better translation. And they had this verse over the Aron Kodesh, Pischu Sha'arim V'yavo Getzadak. And now Shomer Emunim, I never realized was referring to honesty. We think of Emuna as faith, but here it's actually referring to honesty. V'omer Einai b'ne'emnei eretz l'sheves imadi, right? My eyes are looking at those of the land that are trustworthy. Those are the ones that can sit with me. V'omer Einecha halo le'emuna. And then Yirmiyahu says, God, your eyes, aren't they looking out for those that are honest? So I think this is a good place to stop, even though there's still a lot. He's going to be talking a lot more about honesty, and he's going to go deeper and deeper into the issue of honesty and show us just how relevant it really is. But I think it's a good time to stop and open the floor for questions or comments.
I think some of these translations are really a huge stretch. Like faithfulness and honesty to me are completely different. And yet, like in my version, it says, the Holy One, blessed he, desires only faithfulness, parentheses, honesty. And then it quotes the scripture, like what you said, from Psalms and Isaiah and Psalms, and it says faithful in all of those. And I'm like, okay, are we talking about faithfulness or are we talking about honesty? It's just, they're so different.
That's a good observation. So I kind of hinted at when I said that I always look at the word emuna. So like, what does emuna really mean? So I think like
and I thought emuna, because I read a book called and it was by some kind of a rabbi, whatever, but it was like all about emuna. So my understanding after reading this whole book that delved into the universe and emuna, it was like trust. It was like this immense, deep level of trust in the universe, trust in God that there's, some kind of a divine plan or order or whatever things.
Yeah, so I think that the in these verses here, the best probable translation is trustworthiness, which has a little bit of faithfulness in it, right? You trust someone who's faithful, right? But it's not talking in this context. It's not talking about faith such as like faith in God or faith in some kind of belief in some kind of idea. That's a different concept. But here it's talking about emuna, faithfulness, meaning I could trust you, kind of faithfulness, right? You're a faithful worker because I know you're going to do what you're supposed to do. And it also, so I think here's
what the definition of faithfulness is: the quality of being loyal and steadfast, which involves consistently adhering to commitments, promises, and duties.
There you go. I like that. Yeah, so that kind of faithfulness is exactly what this verse is talking about. And to that extent, that's probably the best. Shomer Emunim, right, is probably the nation that is the guardian of faithfulness, is probably the best translation. In this context, especially the way the Ramchal is using this verse, right? Einai b'ne'emnei eretz. My eyes are looking at those who are faithful in the land, l'sheves imadi, right? And it's not referring to faith meaning say, oh, I believe in God. That's a different kind of faith. We can talk about that faith in a different class. But that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about faithful, exactly that translation that she read.
Loyal and steadfast.
Right. You're going to stick with me. You're going to do it. do what's right all the time or at the best of your ability, consistently, constantly, you're there, right? That's the nation that can come in to my doors. This is what God is saying. And that's the Amunah that he's talking about. And that Amunah, like if you know a guy at work who's constantly cutting corners, constantly doing things, somehow always finagling his or her paycheck, so they always get these little bonuses that they didn't, like, every hour they 5 extra minute here, the overtime they didn't really, always figuring out ways to make more than he's supposed to make, right? Or saying that they worked X number of time when they really didn't, or the kind of person that that's not the faithful guy. That's not that's not a person of Amunah. Even though you may not say they're stealing outright, but
They're not trustworthy.
yeah, you wouldn't trust them.
Yeah.
If they came to you, hey, I got a really good investment, you'd probably think more than twice before you gave him a few bucks to invest in his plan.
Yeah, you can't trust they be honest with you.
Yeah, yep. And that's the Nekiut. Did you see the guy run into a store and grab a candy bar and run? No, but it's just not. There's something wrong. And that's what Nekiut is about. It's about the things that aren't so obvious, but we know that they're just not right. Anybody online have anything to add before we close up shop for today? Jeff, I can't hear you. I'm not sure if okay, so my volume is on.
A wonderful class. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. All right. Be well. And for those that are joining us tomorrow, it's Kuzari. It's going to be very different from tonight. And this class, the next one is, what is it? I guess the 4th, November 4th, right? Hopefully the same location for those that come in person.
Wait. There's not going to be one on the 28th?
We have
We do every other week.
Oh,
Right.